Hey up, Rayvers. We're going back to medieval times today, or are we? It's trial by combat.
I demand a trial by combat.
Now, in recent years, the term trial by combat has been popularised, is that a word? Popularised? By Game of Thrones. Yeah, justice being dished out courtesy of a trial by combat, where the winner is proved righteous. Now, this trial by combat is a 1976 film which I stumbled across late one night, flicking channels, many moons ago. And it kicks off in medieval times, where these knights are having a trial by combat. And one of them is Donald Pleasance, and the other one's some nondescript bloke, so no prizes for guessing who wins. But then, once Donald Pleasance has vanquished his opponent, a fella dressed in modern day clothes comes walking out at bushes with his dog. So I'd been duped. The director had subverted my expectations, and it weren't medieval times, it was modern day. Well, the 1970s in this case. And the bloke was none other than Peter Cushing. So I'm thinking, bloody hell, I've never heard of this film before, but we're 5 minutes in, and we've seen Donald Pleasance and Peter Cushing. Anyway, what seemed to be a medieval trial by combat has actually been more like an execution, which obviously Peter Cushing doesn't approve of, does he? So Donald Pleasance and his evil Knights of Avalon ain't having that, and Peter Cushing cops it. We then cut to a motor car driven by Sir John Mills. Bloody hell, 7 minutes in here at best, and we've seen Cushing, Pleasance and John Mills. Never heard of this blooming film, but big guns are in it. Anyway, Mills plays Colonel Bertie Cook, a retired police inspector, who meets up with Sir John Gifford, who's an American bloke, but it transpires that he's Peter Cushing's son.
What about my father's murderer?
That's our first port of call.
Now, he seems a very popular character, Bertie Cook. Ladies love him.
Oh, don't you just want to hug him? Oh, yes.
As do the animals. Anyway, he tells Gifford about this case what he's working on, involving the murder of these alleged criminals by somebody who they're calling the Red Banner Butcher. Because every time they find a body of one of these murdered criminals, they're wrapped up in a red banner. And evidently, Donald Pleasance and his gang, the Knights of Avalon, who are basically a medieval reenactment society, they're responsible for these Red Banner Butcher murders. Because basically, they've lost faith in the justice system and they're taking the law into their own hands by nabbing these criminals and subjecting them to trials by combat.
May God defend the right!
And murdering them all. Rather than risk the justice system not being able to pin them down and send them to prison.
The police wouldn't touch him. The courts couldn't touch him. It was left to us to bring the murdering swine to justice.
Yes, but to kill him!
The whole premise feels like an episode of The Avengers. Exactly the sort of situation you can imagine Mrs. Steed and John Peel getting themselves into. Anyway, at the reading of his dad's will, it turns out that Gifford is entitled to his dad's estate, provided that he stays and lives and works there, instead of buggering off back to America. Otherwise, the estate is going to the Knights of Avalon, the reenactment society, where his dad were a part of, although he didn't know they were doing the murders then. So Gifford decides to stick around for a little bit and do some investigating into his father's death, and also engaging in some of the Knights of Avalon's medieval reenactment stuff. And he shows he can hold his own, because his dad trained him up when he was a youth. And we see more examples of Donald Pleasance's character, Sir Giles Marley, being a really unpleasant shit.
They should have been up hours ago.
The contractors had the date wrong.
Damn it, I pay you to take care of details like that.
So he might as well have a neon sign over his head saying, I murdered your dad. Anyway, Cook and Gifford's investigations lead him to a local crime lord to give him a warning that he's in danger of getting murdered by the Red Banner Butcher, and also to find out what he knows. Enter Sidney Gore, played by one of Britain's best loved actors, Brian Glover. Yeah, he was brilliant, Brian Glover, weren't he? He started as a wrestler. Leon Harris, the man from Paris, extremely entertaining comedy wrestler.
How about that
But then, of course, he was a teacher in Kes, wasn't he? Who were bullying the kids playing football. And he went on to be in loads of films, like American Werewolf in London, and Alien 3. And he was in loads of telly and all. He was in loads of stuff like Minds and The Sweeney. He'd pop up all over the place. He were in Campion. And, of course, he was the voice of Tetley T, weren't he? I mean, I could go on and on about all the stuff he's done.
That's enough.
Fair enough, yeah, fair enough. I'll move on. Henry Road is brilliant in this, is Brian Glover. Absolutely brilliant. Because inevitably he gets captured by the Knights of Avalon and they subject him to a trial by combat. But he gives as good as he gets. He doesn't mess around with any of that medieval stuff. He just uses 20th century fighting tactics.
Up yours.
And he manages to escape, courtesy of this lady who picks him up in a car. And there's a brilliant scene where these knights are chasing after the car, sticking lances and bashing it with balls and chains and stuff like that. Great escapist fun. And the music is superb, really adds to it. But I've got to be honest though, it sounded more like Western music. You know, like from a cowboy film. It didn't really sound very medieval. So I wondered who wrote it, and I watched the credits, but there were no mention of who wrote the music in the credits. So I wondered if it was just some of this bog standard library music stuff, what we use loads in the 60s and 70s. And don't get me wrong, I ain't knocking library music, because I say this music was brilliant. Just didn't really seem like it were written for this film. But yeah, library music, that's provided some of the most iconic theme tunes in TV history, ain't it? Take that Keith Mansfield, for example. He was a bloody genius with his library music. He did the theme tune to The Big Match. The Athletics. Wimbledon, Grandstand, and his music's used in loads of adverts and all.
Is never knowing when you'll get that winning feeling, but every time I do, I like to express it unexpectedly.
I mean, I could go on and on and on about all the brilliant music Keith Mansfield's done over the years.
That's enough.
Fair enough, yeah, I'll move on. Now, Cook and Gifford's investigations lead him to a variety of dodgy individuals and ultimately back to the Knights of Avalon. And this is one of them films, ain't it? British film made in the 1970s, and it's got loads of familiar faces in. So, perfect for another dose of what have they been in? Right, that bloke, you might recognise him, he were a knight in Excalibur. He were one of the Orkmen in Flash Gordon, weren't he? Yeah. That bloke, that's Yossi Hughes, ain't it? Yossi Hughes. Yes, John. Yeah, that were him. She were Del Boy's girlfriend in Only Fools and Horses. I think she were in some soap operas, no, probably EastEnders. That fella, that's Tosh Lines from The Bill. Do you remember Tosh Lines from The Bill? Yeah, put a bit of weight on there, ain't it? Him, you might recognise him as one of the privates from Zulu. And he was also in Clash at Titans as Calibos. Probably won't recognise him from that because of the old makeup. And him, he were Fred Elliott in Coronation Street, weren't he? I said, Ashley. Yeah, that were him, weren't it? I mean, I could go on and on and on about all the familiar faces and all the stuff what they've been in.
That's enough.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's move on. Okeydoo, on to Ray's ratings. Well, like I say, I stumbled across this late one night flicking channels, never heard of it, no idea what it was about. I was expecting that from it, and for it to be a load of shite. 1 star. But then, as the film goes on, and you start to see all these heavyweight actors in it, and you just get caught up in the entertainment value, it was just fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Totally ludicrous, like I say, a bit like a plot from an Avengers episode, but just terrific fun. And it's Brian Glover's finest hour, in my opinion. So worth watching just for him. So whilst I was expecting a 1 star film, the entertainment value was so superb. This is as good a 1 star film as they come. 5 star, 1 star film. Yeah, the acting in this is just superb, because you've got all these heavyweight actors. And it's almost like nobody's told them that this film is a load of cobblers. Donald Pleasance plays it totally straight, and as a result he's a really horrible baddie. John Mills is terrific fun. Peter Cushing isn't in it loads, but he's Peter Cushing, ain't he? Has that gravitas, doesn't he? And Brian Glover, well, he's just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, if I keep giving him any more plaudits, he's going to get embarrassed, ain't he? He's going to get embarrassed.
That's enough.
Yeah, thought as much. Well, I hope you enjoyed this week's review, Rayvers. And if you ain't seen Trial by Combat, try and find it if you can. It's well worth the watch. Very entertaining. Now, you might find it called A Choice of Weapons or A Dirty Night's Work, because I think it had a different title in America. Don't know why. Trial by Combat's a much better title, but yeah, look for it under those names and all. Hey, I know we've got some very knowledgeable ravers out there. If any of you have heard that music before in a different TV programme or a different film, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Yeah, and remember to poke the old like button, give it a good old poking, get your lance out and give it a joust. Poke it with your lance, yeah. Share our reviews with your mates. And of course, subscribe if you ain't already a subscriber. Much appreciated. And I will see you lot next time. Okeydoo.